Okay, so doctor, you are thankfully out there in your field of expertise in the medical world. You're teaching, writing, sometimes arguing against this materialistic worldview.
Right.
What instead are you proposing? Like, what is the human person, and how should we understand the human person when we are carrying out particularly the practice of medicine?
Sure.
That's an easy question, Doctor, too. So honestly, you shouldn't take you but 2 or 3 minutes.
I mean, it's a dissertation in and of itself, but briefly, yeah.
Well, when I did my dissertation actually on philosophical anthropology as it relates in the thought process of Karol Wojtyła, who was Pope John Paul II, and who became Pope John Paul II. So he was a philosopher before, and he studied these notions of person and what the nature of the person is. And in the field of philosophy, we call what John Paul II adhered to was a philosophy of personalism, specifically Christian personalism. So let me take the Christian aspect first.
Okay.
For people that are Christians, and particularly Catholic Christians, we believe that humans have their value from really 2 sources. One, their creator, who is God the Father, creates human beings and imparts on them a absolutely unassailable value because of the fact that they are God's creatures who are created in his image and likeness. And then, of course, there's that counterpart to that, which is that Jesus Christ himself, by assuming the personhood of a man, then further sanctifies human beings and gives them that dignity that also, if Christ died for us and became one of us, our value is secured in that beautiful act of sacrifice. That's the Christian part. The personalistic part is this idea that when we start to break apart, what does it mean to be a human being? John Paul II says there are basically 4 things that make up what a human person is. First is a person that thinks, that person that can reason. Okay, that the kind of being that can reason. And of course, man is a rational animal. We've all heard that, anybody who studied philosophy. He thinks that doesn't go far enough. That's part of it. We're not just rational animals. We're more than that. So he says, look, human beings, the human person also has this capacity to love, to give themselves selflessly to another person. You guys are giving yourselves selflessly to Christ and to the church.
We hope.
People give themselves selflessly, or try to in marriage, ideally, to their children. So there is this only human persons can really do that and have that experience of love. Third is human beings act morally. And no other creature on earth can act morally. That is to say, and he puts it this way, to be able to say, I could do this, but I won't. Okay, if you put 4 bowls of dog food in front of a dog can quote unquote choose which one they want by smelling which one tastes better to them. They're almost always going to go for the one that their instinct tells them. But only a human person can have moral choices and say, I could do this, but I won't. That's really what makes human beings human persons, is not the ability to choose, but the ability to choose the good. And he believes that in acting morally, the human person becomes transformed only in that act. So let me expand on that a little bit more, on this acting morally part, which is sort of this third part. We think to ourselves, we have this expression colloquially, like, I want to be a better person.
Yeah.
John Paul II, think of that. You guys should think of this as a metaphysical statement. When that word be, I want to be a better person, your being actually changes when you do a good act, when you commit to a good act, and you recognize yourself as the originator of that act. It changes you. It changes your ability to see right from wrong, to be able to embrace the good and have that, he calls it the experience of the moral act. So this is not reasoning to a moral act. It's when we do something good and we recognize ourselves as the author of that moral action, it transforms the nature of our being and makes us better, literally a better person. And the converse is true. When you do continuously bad acts, your metaphysical character changes so that your conscience is even altered, right? So we always see these people that, they always seem to do the right thing. Yeah, they do seem to do the right thing because This is a habitual practice that is changing the person. And likewise, the people that always do the bad thing, their ability to see and discern what's right and wrong also changes.
Yeah.
But this is a characteristic that only human persons can have, and to act morally is such a it has such a sacred character, such a serious character. That's why the materialist view, in contrast, is kind of insulting. Like, all we have to do is choose, and whatever we choose is good.
Right. Right.
No, John Paul II says we should choose the good, not whatever we choose is therefore good.
Right.
By the fact
Yeah.
that we choose it. That to me is like almost insulting of what the human character is or should be. Well, and I think the last thing that John Paul II says the human person is, and what gives them their value, is that human persons live in solidarity with another. And he uses this word solidarity. And I think this is just a wonderful idea that shows the interrelatedness of human persons to one another. Martin Luther King Jr., who was another personalist, Christian personalist, although not a Catholic, but he had this great quote where he says, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality.
Wow.
And he was right.
Yeah.
That and John Paul II, sort of echoes this when he talks about how this notion of solidarity means, even to bring it back around to our discussion of suffering, even in suffering, there is a solidarity there that's part and parcel of being a human person. Why is suffering important for us? Because we are called to solidarity with another person who suffers. That's part of our nature. To avoid it, to try to run from it, to say suffering is evil, it does damage to the nature of ourselves as persons.